Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Last year I did a video about my favorite queer SFF books, and I talked about a lot of fantasy and a little bit of sci-fi with central queer characters, gay characters, lesbian characters, trans characters, stuff like that. I will link that video at the end of this one if you want to go check it out. I will do an updated version later on this month with new books that I've read where I just really liked the way that queer characters were portrayed in them. But for today, I'm gonna do the kind of mirror for that last video because I'm gonna talk about all of the books with queer characters that I loved that are not sci-fi and fantasy, so a lot of like other genres. I do like to read quite broadly, so I do have a lot of other recommendations as well. So if you're not the biggest fantasy reader or you just want to branch out, this video might be more to your taste. I will talk about some horror and thriller books, we'll talk about some romance and contemporary and literary fiction books, and I also will mention some non-fiction at the end. So let's get into it. I hope this video doesn't get too long. So I will mix a YA and adult. I hope you don't mind that. And we're gonna start out with the thriller and horror books. And the first two I want to recommend to you are by the same author. The first book I want to recommend is Ace of Spades. In this book we do have a central character who's gay. We are following two black students at a school where all of the other students are white. One of these students is a boy who, as I said, is gay, but he's in the closet and he's scared that his mother and his family will find out. And the other character is a girl, and I think she is gay as well. I'm not quite sure anymore if I remember that correctly. And she is like the queen bee. She's very popular. But then things start happening. There is these messages that all of the school receive that are threatening to bring out their secrets. And yeah, it's just a very, very good thriller for young adults. I really enjoyed this book and I would highly recommend. And by the same author, we also got Where Sleeping Girls Lie. This one wasn't quite my favorite. It's still a good YA thriller, but my expectations were so high that it just couldn't meet it. In this one, we're following a young girl who goes to a boarding school for the first time. And when she gets there, her roommate disappears and she's trying to find out what happened. This one is also sapphic. Our main character is a lesbian. Next up, we have a horror book, also YA, and that is Sawkill Girls, and I absolutely love this book. I desperately want to reread it. In this one, we're following this island and we have three girls. One is just arriving at the island and the other two girls are already living there. This one also has asexual representation, and the main couple is a sapphic couple, and I love this book. It is so creepy and eerie. There is girls disappearing and a monster in the woods, and just the vibes of this book are fantastic. Next up, we have Plain Bad Heroines. This is an adult horror that is also very sapphic. I really like this book as well. It is told quite slowly, and I loved the historical storyline more than the current storyline that we get in this book. And we're following this former boarding school and a movie production that is trying to do a movie about what happened at the school in, I think, the 30s or something like that. It's also very much vibes, very eerie, and I love the character work in this one as well. Very highly recommend. Then we have one that hasn't received a lot of positive reviews, but I absolutely loved it. Again, it is very much vibes, and that is Yellow Jessamine. In this book, we are following already a little bit older woman, so this is an adult horror novella, and and she is a woman who is very wealthy, and we have this like merchant environment, and she's like the only woman in there. All the other merchants are men, and she is kind of defending her position while creepy things start happening. Though this has a little bit of a historical feel, but it is a fantasy world, and it's very much like dark, creepy vibes, and I really loved it. This one is sapphic as well. Last but not least, we have another YA horror, and that one is My Dearest, Darkest. In this one, we're going back to a school setting, a young girl who, after a tragic accident, gets into this very fancy boarding school, but there is a big secret in the tunnels underneath the school, and this one is also sapphic. Now we're gonna change pace a little bit, and we're gonna talk about some romance. Now I'm not a big romance reader, so I don't have a ton of recommendations, but these are the ones that I really liked. And the first one is a Christmas romance that I always love to shout out, so already mark your calendars for this one, and that is Make You Mine This Christmas. This is again a sapphic romance story set during Christmas. We have a meet cute in a bookstore, and I love this book so much. It is so cute, it is so adorable. I love these two characters, and I love the story. I think this is my favorite holiday romance I've read, so I hope you will check it out. The next one is a kind of Halloweenish fall romance, and that is Payback's A Witch. Now, I would not recommend continuing on with the series. The second book fell so flat for me, and the third book I didn't even try reading. But this first book was really good. I really liked the mix of fantasy and romance we get in here. It's definitely a romance book first, but there is still this like very fall town. It feels so autumnal. The setting is great. The vibes are great, and we also have this magical contest between these witchy families, and I was surprised how much I enjoyed that fantasy aspect as well of the story, as well as the couple. I think that the two characters we see meet here are really great together, so I really enjoyed Payback's A Witch. And last but not least, for more of a YA romance, I wanted to mention Heartstopper. You've probably all heard about it, but this is the story of Nick and Charlie, two boys who meet at school and slowly develop feelings for each other. We do have bisexual representation in this one, which is amazing, and I also really enjoyed just the way their relationship builds, how these characters experience their queerness. It's amazing. I love the TV show even more than the comics, but I think the comics are really good as well. Now, moving over to contemporary, this first one I wanted to mention just because I feel like it's not talked about a lot anymore, and it's one of my favorite books of all time. And while the main character isn't gay, one of the central side characters is, and I think that this book still deals with sexuality in a very important way, and that is Perks of Being a Wallflower. This book was very important to me personally. When I read it, I bawled my eyes out. There was so much in there that I just needed to hear. We're following a young boy who kind of has this mental breakdown, and the book is written in a diary format where he just talks us through what happened to him, and this deals with the consequences of sexual assault, or kind of like grooming in a way. And yeah, I really love this book. Then we have a book that I also really loved when it came out, and I definitely want to reread it, and that is Felix Ever After. This is a book that focuses on a trans boy, or like a demi boy, who is also gay, and he goes to this school where people are sharing his pre-transition pictures, and he's struggling with that. He's trying to find out who did that, and in the process there's also a little bit of a love story. And yeah, that was just a really good book that I would definitely recommend if you like YA contemporary books. Then one I also enjoyed, I wasn't obsessed with it, but it was definitely an interesting read, is The Henna Wars. This is also a sapphic story, so we have two girls falling in love in this like school competition. So this is kind of like a rivals to lovers, because both of these girls are basically doing the same little project for the school competition, which has to do with like henna art, and so they slowly develop feelings through their rivalry. And last but not least, a phenomenal book that is also YA contemporary that I wanted to recommend to you is We Deserve Monuments. In this one we're following a young girl who is mixed race, and she goes back to the south with her family and lives with her grandma, who's going to pass away soon. So she's dealing with her family history, also with some mysterious things about this town. And yeah, this was just a fascinating read about race, about queerness in the US, and I would highly recommend. This was such a good book. If you read any of these that I just mentioned, definitely read this one. Now moving over to more like historical and literary fiction, the first one I have, I also know that it is a little bit problematic, especially the racial representation we get in here, but I still wanted to mention it because when I read it I absolutely loved it. Still need to reread it though, and that is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which has a bi main character and a sapphic romance within it. This one we're following Evelyn Hugo on her walk to fame. This also has a little bit of a mystery element because we see Evelyn as an old woman when she's very famous, but she doesn't really want to give interviews, but then she chooses this one young reporter who's also mixed race, I think, to give her an interview about her whole life. And the question is like, why this woman? Why did she choose her? And yeah, this is a very fascinating look at fame, at love, especially in more historical settings when it is sapphic. And yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Then another one that is a bit different is We Are Not Free. This is a YA historical fiction, and it focuses on the time of the Second World War in the US when there were the Japanese internment camps, and we're following a group of Japanese American teenagers who have to move into these internment camps, and the things they have to go through there. One of these kids is gay, so I wanted to mention it here, and the way this is told is that we basically get a chapter from each of these perspectives. I found this a little bit jarring because of all the connections. You constantly shift the perspective, so the brother in one perspective then might be the love interest in the next perspective, and it was quite hard to keep track of it all. Like I would have had to use like a visual of the connections, but this story still was really good, and I would definitely recommend if you read YA historical fiction. The next book I wanted to mention is also focusing on different things but has central queer characters, and that is The Vanishing Half. This is a book where we follow the lives of two sisters and their daughters, and these sisters were white passing, but one decided to marry a dark-skinned man and therefore had a darker skinned daughter, while the other married a white man and is white passing and lives as a white woman, and so her daughter is also white. And we see what that does to their lives and how that changes their perspectives and their relationship. And it's a very good book, and one of the side characters that is quite important is trans in this one. Then another book that deals with race as well in the US is The Secret Lives of Church Ladies. This is a short story collection, but some of these stories focus on queer women, actually quite a few do, so I wanted to mention that in here as well. So we have quite a few like sapphic stories and stuff like that, and this collection is just fantastic. It's not very long. The stories are all so good, so please check this collection out. Then we have another one that is a little bit controversial, but still one that I just really enjoyed when I read it, and that is Call Me By Your Name, which has gay and bi representation in it. Obviously, we all know about the peach scene, and that was definitely a little bit out there, but I still really like this book for just the vibes. This like Italian summer dream where you don't have to do anything. Like, I would give my life for a summer like that, where just for weeks on end I don't have to do anything apart from falling in love with someone. That would be awesome. Then we have On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous. This is a very poetic book, so this is not like actual poetry, but it reads very much like poetry. This is described as a letter from a son to his mother who can't read, and in this one we are following a boy who is of Vietnamese descent and he is gay. And so he writes to his mother about his life and his feelings and basically tells her everything he never had the courage to tell her to her face. And it's also a very, very moving story where we get some glimpses also into the history of this family and how it was impacted by war, for example. Last but not least, we do have a story set in India, and that is The Sea Elephants. In this one, we also follow a young boy as he grows up and realizes that he is gay. This is set in the 90s in India when homosexual acts were still forbidden by law. This is a very harrowing read. I would not recommend this if you are struggling with internalized homophobia or anything like that, because that is very prevalent in this book. The like situations our main character gets into are also very horrible, and people don't accept him. He's threatened, he is assaulted, and he at the end also is in one of those conversion facilities. So it's definitely a very hard read, a very sad story, but an important one nonetheless. And what I really liked about this book is that he joins a street theater group and he meets some like-minded people, and that helps him overcome a lot of what he has been taught as a young boy. I really, really love that. Okay, we're almost there. Next up, I have 3 classics I wanted to mention. Now keep in mind that with classics, usually the queer representation is a lot more in the undertones than it is in nowadays like contemporary stories. But with these 3, I feel like it's still very, very strong. So if you're looking for some queer vibes in your classics, then I would recommend these. The first one, the obvious one, is The Picture of Dorian Gray. This is one of my favorite classics. I definitely want to reread it soon as well. And we are following a young man who has his portrait painted and then realizes that instead of himself, his portrait is aging for him. So he will forever be beautiful and young, while the portrait takes on all of the harshness of the world, and we see how that corrupts our main character. Love this story so much. Then the next one is Go Tell It on the Mountain. I still haven't read Giovanni's Room, but that one is definitely on my list as well. But I was quite surprised that we already have some gay undertones in Go Tell It on the Mountain. And this is a phenomenal book where we're looking at a young boy and his family, the struggles he has with his family and why that is. This is also a book about being Black in the US. And it also deals with like church and religion, and I found it to be very, very impactful. And last but not least, we have Mrs. Dalloway. This one has some sapphic undertones to it, and it is famous for being like the stream of consciousness tale where we are skipping like from brain to brain in the story. So this is quite a different way of telling a story, and I think it is set all within 24 hours. It was definitely an interesting reading experience where we just follow Mrs. Dalloway through her day when she is planning a party and some people are showing up that she hasn't seen for a while. And last but not least, I wanted to recommend you 3 non-fiction books if you're interested in queer themes. The first one is Ace. This is a book about asexuality and I really enjoyed this one. I think that if you are struggling with the idea of asexual people, you definitely need to read this book. This also explains a lot how being asexual in a so highly sexualized world is very difficult. Yeah, definitely recommend this one. Next, we do have two books by the same author. One is a very short one. It is called M2WTF, where the author talks about transitioning from male to female. So it's a trans story, and this is a little bit more lighthearted, trying to find like positive aspects and making fun of some things. So if you like more lighthearted stuff, I would definitely recommend this one. And the other book by this author, Real Queer America, was really interesting as well because it focuses on queer people in red states and why they are so important, how they live their lives, and yeah, definitely recommend this one. So now my camera is running out of power, so I will say goodbye to you. I hope there were some books that you're now interested in. Let me know which ones you want to check out in the comments, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye!